Welcome to this session on, I guess, basic soft food and the logic for why supplementing the diet of your birds is needed, really. Now, our standard sort of diet that pet owners, even breeders, would be feeding their birds is going to be, I guess, a mixture of a standard seed mixture we've got on the bottom left here. Maybe this is being supplemented with things like millet sprays, which is the middle right, which birds adore. You've got honey bars on the bottom, but again, this is essentially seed. And a lot of people will be using cuttlefish to supplement calcium, top right. Maybe some grit top left, and that's obviously a controversial thing in terms of what people use. Iodine, obviously, we know as a deficiency is a problem as well, and you have iodine nibbles, which is in the middle of the slide here, and you might be thinking of feeding some premium egg food or rearing food alongside that. I suppose that the key points when you look at a budgie is this is a granivorous species of bird. It's got a big gizzard, it's muscular, with a thick interior lining designed to grind food. Budgies can't tolerate anything with lactose in it, so they lack lactases, so any dairy products is something that you should not be feeding to your birds. And also they have no real seeker, so these aren't really hindgut fermenters, if that makes sense. They need something they can digest in their gizzard that passes through the GI tract fairly quickly. Now, if we start looking at seeds, there's a number of references and papers out there to look at seeds, and I guess, you know, see how good or bad seed is relatively for a bird's diet. And we know that the nutritional contents of seeds in commercial diets compared to the estimated needs of citizen birds are different. And there's a whole variety of amino acids, calcium, phosphorus, sodium, manganese. You know, if you start looking through the references here, then there's quite a wide range of deficiencies that we know you will get feeding your bird on solely a seed diet. Now, seed might not be great from a nutritional point of view, but budgies do take it readily, and the vast majority of birds are kept on seed. We want to make sure the hygiene and quality of the seed you get is the best you can get, and that's obviously where we've partnered with Haste, for example, because the seed quality cannot really be rivaled, really. It is excellent. So that's a good starting point, if that makes sense. And because all birds are on seed, they'll be on seed when they come from the pet store, or your birds are already on seed, or the breeders are using seed, you can see how this has become quite a routine feature in their diet, particularly given they are granivores and designed to eat it. Seed does provide sufficient energy for maintenance. It does provide sufficient protein for maintenance. But what we've got to look at is saying, okay, there are deficiencies that we know that occur during maintenance which the seed doesn't provide for, and we also know if you're breeding birds, for example, then the demands of egg laying and rearing are greater still, and there's more things we need to be considering here. So there's always been this thing, well, if they're feeding seed, what are we going to do? How are we going to improve this? And historically there's been attempts made to correct the nutritional balance in seed by coating them with vitamin or mineral supplements, or providing pellets in with the seed diets, assuming the birds are going to pick out these supplements and things like that. The trouble you've got is the seed husks are removed and any coatings are lost when that happens, and if you put supplemented pellets in with the diet, then they're generally not consumed either. So realistically, supplementing something on the seed or putting extras in the seed mix, you're relying on the bird choosing them, and nobody really has any sensible nutritional wisdom, me included, so that's very, very variable. And if you put supplements in the water, again, a very popular choice that's undertaken, but birds have a massively variable water intake, so you just cannot guarantee they're going to be drinking enough of that. And just in the same way, I cannot guarantee they're going to be taking cuttlefish or taking iodine blocks. It really makes life difficult. And I suppose one of the solutions, or for me, what I think is the best solution, is if we've got an additional part of the diet that we have trained our birds to eat that is palatable, that is a very good way of getting supplementation into your bird, providing you've gone through that effort and that process of training them to eat it in the first place. Certainly from a breeder's point of view, there is an advantage in selecting maybe more canary seed and groats, because these have slightly higher protein, but not really enough to have a massive impact. But even if you were breeding birds, even choosing these products, these are lower than the levels required for growing chicks in the nest. So if we're going to give a novel food source to a bird, I've got to train it to take that food source. And most birds are receptive to novel foods when they first fledge prior to weaning, particularly if they've been fed this as a chick from the mother, from the hen. And it can be difficult getting an older bird to take a new diet. So I should stop before we go on to soft food here, just to take a little sidestep here into complete pelleted diets, because one of our partners, Meadows Animal Health, they have what is probably the market leader from the veterinary sector, at least in terms of complete pelleted diets, which is Harrison's. And these are brilliant. I mean, this is a brilliant product designed for captive citizens, where if you're converting a bird away from a seed diet onto a pelleted diet, then the Harrison's is unrivaled really in terms of its nutritional value to them. And it comes as pellets, as you would expect. But of course your bird that's been on seed for however long has to learn to accept this as a new food source, and they might not recognize it as food. And of course they also have to eat it differently as well. So there is an element of training here too that needs to happen. And certainly where a lot of breeders are thinking of using pellets, I've actually used the Harrison's as part of the soft food mixture to encourage a transition phase over where they're getting the flavour of the product we'd like them to have. But certainly I think this is viable and a very good option for individual pet birds. But if you've got a bird that's just on seed, this can be difficult to transition them over. So for me, for my best sort of compromise between this pellets versus seed is, if they're going to take seed, I want something to be taken alongside that seed that the bird has been trained to eat, ideally from a very young age, trying to plug the gaps in known common deficiencies. We're targeting the main deficiencies here at the sort of starting point of having this as an idea. And this isn't a maintenance diet. It's a component of that diet designed to balance or compensate for the deficiencies we get in seed. What we need to work out is roughly how much the birds are going to eat of this diet, and I guess look at what sort of overall nutrient profile we want their diet to be. And if you want to sort of step back and find some sensible logic somewhere, then just reach straight for hand rearing diets. The big company hand rearing diets, I've just put NutriBird up here, but obviously there's a number of brands. Harrison's do their own, for example, which is a very good product too. These are designed to be the sole diet for juveniles while they're being reared, which is great. And they've got full nutrient analysis. And okay, the main ones we're interested here perhaps is protein at 20%, 1.15% calcium, vitamin A, vitamin D and iodine in there as well, which I've just highlighted here. But the fact is, you go on the back of the product, you have got everything on there you wanted to. And this obviously these are products that have been used, tried and tested over the years for rearing young birds. Next on your list might be some of the classical sort of commercial egg foods out there. And if you actually look at these and then look at their composition relative to the hand rearing diets, they're very comparable. These are designed for rearing babies, but again, they're probably designed primarily as the sole food source. And this is very comparable to what you want the whole diet to be. But of course, this isn't the whole diet. This is just part of the diet. And we've got to factor in here, we've got breeding birds and maintenance birds here, and we've got to look at trying to account for both of those two. A diet for birds that are rearing chicks or are growing chicks or are laying eggs is different to a diet for an adult bird that's sitting around just being an adult bird. We want the grower breeder diet really needs to match the growing chick requirements and the hen and the requirements of the mother for good quality egg production. And this diet needs to be introduced really at the start of nesting behaviour, give them a good fortnight's run in to build their levels before they start laying, for example, and obviously continue to feed it right the way through so the babies get used to taking it as well. My assumptions here are you're going to be feeding seed as your basic diet. We know, and again I'm not going into details on what is this little presentation for you this stage, but we know that seed is probably going to be 75% of your bird's intake. We know during egg laying they might consume up to 20 grams per pair, which means they'll probably take 25% of their diet, which is going to be soft food, about a teaspoon, 5 grams, okay? And on the sort of there's more health presentations coming through in more detail, which you can obviously join our membership and you can get access to these to understand a lot more of the logic behind this sort of mixture that I certainly use for my birds. Is a good starting point, I think, for people to start to think about things. And when we look at this, this is again just an extract from another paper here, but basically the key point here is it must be remembered that these birds are often slow to accept novel foods, and it may take up to 2 weeks before their intake increases to a point where it is of any nutritional value in the diet. Not as in they're taking it as a full diet, just to be of any benefit at all. And this process is affected by early dietary experience, and budgies will eat most readily the seeds given to them as chicks. Okay, this is seed, but we're talking soft food here as well. So I want to train my budgies that I'm breeding them to take this as they are babies, and they will then continue to take it as adults, and they will then feed it to their babies, and so forth. The cycle continues. The trouble you've got from the pet point of view is you're buying a random bird from a pet shop and it's probably been on seed and you've no idea how it was raised or reared and what sort of soft food was used. So from a seed point of view, energy's fine. Carbohydrates and fats, generally okay. Protein is about 12%. That's okay if you're not breeding. Okay, the protein's value is all right. But what we're concerned about here is there's no calcium, no vitamin A, no vitamin D, no iodine. These really are our major deficiency areas that we're concerned about. So we know we've got to ramp up calcium when they're breeding. We've got to get the vitamin A and vitamin D up to baseline levels. Iodine is a problem generally in birds deficiency, in breeders' birds and in pet birds. And if you're growing or breeding, I've got to ramp up that protein. And maybe if I've got some deficiency in certain amino acids, maybe I should be pushing a little bit more protein through to try and compensate for some of these rate limiting amino acids as well. And the question is how do we achieve that on a simple basis? I suppose my first thing for you, and this is the sort of software that I would use for mine here, what we got, and you're adding, when you're thinking, what am I going to put into this software? What am I going to make this supplement for? Well, okay, it's going to give energy, because if you've got them rearing chicks, it's got to have energy in there. If we're going to add something to it, it needs to improve its palatability and consistency. It's got to be nice to eat, because if the birds aren't going to take to it, well, then there's no point giving it. We've got to train them to eat it. And if you're going to add something to your soft food, the first question I would ask you is, why are you adding it? And if you can't come out with a really sensible, justifiable, evidence-based reason for it, don't add it. Because you're just wasting your time and putting random things in. So, again, a little bit of an overview, but if you want calcium, the most concentrated source of calcium you can get is calcium carbonate. That's limestone flour. That's 40% calcium. We can use this to boost the calcium in the diet quite easily, and it's not expensive. Number 2, cod liver oil. Used obviously in human medicine. Many years ago, people still take supplements of cod liver oil, and it's certainly been used in diets for birds for decades. Cod liver oil is high in vitamin A, high in vitamin D, again a very good source for supplementing those two through. And this is just a lovely paper, 2015 now, so not that old, but again here we have we've got a load of birds dying due to an enlarged crop due to iodine deficiency due to goiter and thyroid hyperplasia. Some discrepancies on the details of the paper, and like I say, we'll go into more detail into the research into this on some other presentations, but the fact of the matter is it's still a thing, it is a real thing. One of our other partners, Fab Finches, for example, they do the liquid iodine from morning bird products, which I use, for example, which works well, but equally Lugol's iodine and things is equally suitable as an iodine source for your budgies. And again, Lugol's iodine is incredibly cheap, but the liquid iodine just seems to work quite nicely and works well. If you're breeding, then we do need a major shift in protein levels. If we want 20% protein in total, seed only has 12% but is 75% of the diet, you can see our soft feed we're making, we have to ramp up the protein quite high to compensate, as 3/4 of the diet is deficient in protein for breeding birds. And although protein isn't necessarily a requirement for non-breeding birds, maybe it's worthwhile giving them a little bit of a taste in this, because when it comes to breeding, this maintenance soft food mixture is going to be altered for the breeding birds, and they need to get the taste of it and ready to eat it before you change its composition when you put the birds down to breed. And I've just put on here sort of basically you've got mealworms, or dried mealworms are a great source of protein, being 50% protein, and if you want to ramp it up a little bit more, and this is just one example of a product from Sam One Bird Products here, but a lot of the whey proteins can have protein levels of really in excess of 80%, so you can use products to push up the protein content quite effectively, and this would be my suggestions for you to start thinking about. So for me, I want calcium carbonate in this because that's bringing in my calcium. It's finely milled, so it's got a greater chance of being absorbed without interfering palatability. I've got cod liver oil, an acquired taste, that's bringing vitamin A and vitamin D. Liquid iodine is, well, it's bringing in iodine because that's what it is. Dried mealworms are going to bring in me some protein. And then you think, how do I make this into a mixture that makes it palatable and edible for them? And so maybe then bread, eggs and carrots are added. These might be fillers or whatever, or vehicles. What I'm trying to do is to make an egg food that they are drawn, or a soft food that they are drawn to, that they want to eat. And what I want is to have the bread, eggs and carrots finely, and the mealworms if you like, finely coated in the supplements that I want to get into the birds to try and balance out their diet. And if we look at these in a bit more detail, well, bread is no better in protein than anything else, to be honest. It's got no calcium, no vitamin A, no vitamin D either. It literally is there just to try and improve consistency and everything else. That's its sole purpose. So it doesn't have to be there, but I have it in mind, I guess. And then a lot of people would use classical egg foods as well, and I'm not a great fan of classical egg foods from a breeding budgie point of view, simply because these again are designed as complete diets for rearing, which means they're deficient in terms of a soft food, if that makes sense. Cod liver oil brings vitamin A and vitamin D in abundance. Calcium carbonate brings calcium in abundance. And like I say, if you're adding in whey protein or something there, or mealworms, that's going to push in your protein content as well. Now, if you said, well, actually, this sounds very complicated for me. I've got a pet budgie sitting in a cage at home. I want to do something right for that bird, but I don't want to go crazy about that. Then the egg food with their classical composition isn't so bad, because bear in mind this bird isn't going to be rearing or laying eggs. One would hope it's not going to be laying eggs. They do sometimes. If they do, just ask us for advice if that makes sense. We can guide you through that, because we do see persistent egg laying in the budgies from time to time. But the egg food does have some vitamin A and vitamin D added to that as well. It does have some iodine added as well. So, and the protein and the calcium level's okay. Protein maybe is all right actually as it stands for that. So if we had a pet bird and they were taking a little bit of a branded egg food diet as part of their diet alongside seed, you could take this egg food product and go, okay, maybe I want to put a little bit more calcium in it. Maybe it needs a little bit more cod liver oil in there for vitamin A and D. And maybe some carrot or something to improve its palatability to get the bird to take it would be suitable. So it's not without the remit of getting your bird to take a standard egg food, top dressing it with little bits and pieces to try and balance your pet budgie's diet out. And certainly I think that's a very easy way to go forward for that. The dried egg food is simple to get hold of commercially, and calcium carbonate, cod liver oil, very easy to get commercially, and you've hopefully got carrots knocking around at home anyway. So before you know it, or even if you're using hard-boiled egg, for example, you'll have these products to hand. It's very easy to make at home without the need for spending a lot of money on commercial supplements. From a point of view, if you're breeding, you do need to get the protein in there more. So you've got mealworms, and obviously again, this is just going through it for you a little bit, but obviously the mealworms and the whey proteins, these have got to be weighed out for a set amounts to be added to the soft food mixture. Average hard-boiled egg is 42 grams, so that works out quite nice. Going to put some bread in there, again to try and improve palatability as a filler to some extent. Then you're reaching for cod liver oil, reaching for calcium carbonate powder, and obviously if you're looking at other protein sources, for the example in this sort of iteration, I actually had spirulina in there as well, but spirulina is an acquired taste, so I've kind of gone for the unflavoured whey protein as a preference for that. And obviously carrots are great to improve palatability, but I actually blend mine because I want this to be thoroughly mixed. I don't want hot spots of iodine or hot spots of calcium or things like that. So this actually is blended to the right consistency to try and get an even spread of nutrients throughout the entire mixture. And so we end up with this sort of style product coming along. Okay, the one on the left here is with spirulina, one on the right is with whey protein without the spirulina, but it's that sort of crumbly texture you've got here that we're aiming to get to the point of that these birds have been trained to eat. And bear in mind, it does involve some training. So when we're looking at these from birds that are rearing, for example, this would be my basic rearing food suggestion for you here. I'm a little bit hesitant about the iodine in these because you don't want to have hot spots of iodine. You want to try and have that diluted down. So if you're finding your mixtures coming through a bit on the drier side, you could dilute your liquid iodine down in some water first just to spread it out a bit more so it gets a more even spread and coverage within the mixture. But this would be my standard sort of start. I'd be blending the dry sort of ingredients first, adding a bit of cod liver oil, then adding the boiled eggs at the end, and basically make it into a mix for the birds to take at the right consistency. Too much blending, you have a sticky goo, they won't eat it. Too little blending, you probably don't have a good enough mix of the components. And for those of you that are resting your birds but you still want to get them used to it, all we're doing with this mixture really then is taking back the calcium carbonate a smidgen, but we are reining back the higher protein mealworms and whey protein here because they don't really need it for maintenance. But this is, I just want these to get the little flavour of that. I want them just to get the taste of those coming through, because when it comes to breeding, those two components are going to be increased within the mixture. So your final analysis really is seed is deficient in calcium and vitamin D. I would use a soft food to get supplementation on board, to get calcium in, get vitamin D in, get vitamin A in, get iodine on board, push the protein if needed. You've got to train your birds to take it. The best chance you've got is when they're a baby or when you've just acquired them and they are young. And you do want to provide this all year round on a daily basis. So there's loads more presentations for you in much more depth in terms of budgie nutrition that are coming. Join us. Budgies always come first, and we will help you to look after your bird as best as we can.